Today on Super Soul Sunday.
Welcome.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
They call him the Zen Master. 11-time NBA championship coach and best-selling author Phil Jackson is here.
You're somebody I've wanted to talk to for a long time.
It might surprise you to learn that he's not just one of the most innovative leaders of our time.
I think authenticity is really what it's all about.
He's also a student of philosophy and a true seeker.
You studied multiple religions. We're drawn to Zen Buddhism. Why?
Phil opens up about his strict religious upbringing.
You're brought up Pentecostal.
Holy rollers.
The Holy Rollers.
Yeah,
You were the Holy Roller family.
And how his spiritual quest shaped his own unique and sometimes eyebrow-raising coaching style.
What did the guys think of you coming in with your Zen stuff?
How he challenged some of the league's biggest superstars to connect on a whole new level.
So you would literally have the guys sit in stillness, meditating.
Earning a record-shattering 11 NBA championship titles.
That is amazing.
What is the next chapter for this living legend?
I love that it's called 11 Rings. Is there a part of you that wants a 12th?
Super Soul Sunday with Phil Jackson starts right now. I wanted a place for people to go every Sunday to wake up. Thought-provoking.
Oh, you couldn't have said that better.
Eye-opening and inspiring.
This is my favorite thing to talk about.
This'll lift you right on up. It's food for your soul.
Every single Sunday.
This is Super Soul Sunday.
Well, he's certainly the tallest guest we've ever had on Super Soul Sunday. Phil Jackson has been called one of the greatest basketball coaches of all time. But this is not really a conversation about basketball because this is not your average coach. After all, this is the man they call the Zen Master. Take a look.
Born in 1945 in Deer Lodge, Montana, Phil Jackson grew up in a strict religious home. His parents were both Pentecostal ministers, and the family spent all of their free time practically at church. As a teenager, sports, and particularly basketball, became an escape for Phil, and he excelled at it. Already 6'5" by his junior year, Phil became his high school's most valuable player, so it was no surprise when he got a basketball scholarship to the University of North Dakota. It was there that Phil began his journey as a seeker, learning about and experimenting with Christian mysticism, Native American rituals, and Zen meditation, all later used as principles for his coaching. In 1967, he was drafted by the New York Knicks, where he earned 2 championship rings in the early 70s and learned the value of awareness, selfless team play, and the importance of forging a deeper bond between players. As head coach, he promoted these same values, guiding some of the greatest sports superstars of our time to play for something greater than themselves. Players like Michael Jordan, Shaquille O'Neal, and Kobe Bryant. Dubbed the Zen Master for introducing players to meditation, yoga, and Tai Chi, Phil was able to use his spiritual influences as a motivator to success.
Well, this is what we play for.
It's the subject of his latest memoir, 11 Rings, which debuted in true Phil Jackson style at #1 on the New York Times bestsellers list.
Welcome, Phil Jackson.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
You know, you're somebody I've wanted to talk to for a long time, for years. And then I see the title of your new book, 11 Rings, The Soul of Success. And I thought, whoa, if that is not exactly what I want to talk about. So what is the soul of success? Well, beautiful book, must I say.
Thank you.
It's great for anybody who, first of all, loves the game, but also leadership, looking for leadership advice or leadership entrepreneurship. It's a spiritual book.
Yeah. I want to give people some confidence in trusting their own intuition, in leading from the inside out rather than having to follow perhaps, say, Steve Jobs' leadership rules or whatever, to know that you can incorporate what's part of who you identify with and what you've been brought up with and allow that to come through you, because I think authenticity is really what it's all about, to be authentic.
To be able to have the courage to follow that which is authentic within you.
That takes courage, there's no doubt.
It takes courage to do it. So it's so interesting. You're brought up Pentecostal.
That's right.
Let's define what that means for our viewers.
Let me say this about that before we start. My father's family were Puritans. My mother's family were Mennonites. They were both from families of people that were religious zealots in many ways. When the wave of Pentecostalism came through America in the 20s, they followed that. It was a new spiritual awakening in America. And a church called the Assemblies of God Church and a church called the Church of God both became legitimate Protestant movements at that time. And they were believing in the infilling of the Holy Ghost and the Holy Spirit in your life, an actual spiritual experience. So there's a lot of outpouring of the Spirit in the church services that you go to. A lot of our music that we have in our modern day rock and roll came out of Pentecostal backgrounds. Jerry Lee Lewis, a pianist, is one of the many that you can name that came out of this. So it was a religion that was founded on a lot of spirit. I sat and listened to a lot of sermons and a lot of church meetings over, the 17 years I was at home.
And it's very strict.
Very much so. Like, I remember some church people called up my mother and said, I saw your daughter, she had on a pair of capri pants. And, my sister was in nursing school. And
so you couldn't wear lipstick or makeup or listen to music on the... Could you listen to music, but couldn't listen to music on Sundays?
Well, Sundays were a totally different day, but, my brother could smuggle in Chubby Checker and some stuff like that when I was young.
And you and your brother had to go to school in your little white shirts.
Sundays, we stayed in our suits all day long. So our Sunday playtime between morning service and evening service was relegated to things that were very quiet and allowed that day to be special. And it was really looked at as like a Sabbath.
Were you made fun of at school because you were the guys...
Holy Rollers.
The Holy Rollers.
Yeah,
you were the Holy Roller family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But things started changing in the 60s. And my prowess as a basketball player obviously opened some doors for my family.
Basketball was your door to freedom.
And baseball. I played all the sports, but
But at one point, you write that your father and mother had wanted you to start speaking in tongues.
That's right.
Yeah, which means you're visited by this Holy Spirit.
Yes, you have this infilling experience, and you have to seek. It's like you have to pray, and people pray for quite a period of time, and you really have to search your soul. Do I have anything in the way of my being completely open to the Spirit filling my being? And it was a question for me all the time as to, am I pure enough? Am I holy enough? Am I sinless enough to accept this? So there's always this probing about your inner being and how.
During those years, Phil, did you believe what you were being told? Did you believe that the Lord thy God does not want you to wear capri pants? Did you believe?
No, that part of it was on the...
the Chubby Checker was a detriment to your soul. Did you believe that?
Not really. I mean, those things I knew, when I talked to my mother, for example, my mother would come to my bed and say goodnight sometimes, and she'd be talking to me, and we get in these conversations.
Yeah.
Like we'd talk about, why can't we dance?
Yeah.
Why can't we dance? Well, you can't dance because really it's an awakening of your sexual being. And at that level of being a young person, when you awaken that being, sometimes people don't stop, and it leads to pregnancy and other things. And so dancing becomes something that we don't condone.
Yeah.
And then everything blew open in the 60s, in the late 60s that with the advent of, birth control pills, all of a sudden chastity was not something that was being held as a mark of esteem in those ways, and experience was what people sought. And so it was really conflicting for a young person brought up in my age.
Coming up, the minister's son heads off to college and starts to question everything.
What did you think at first? This is blasphemous?
Oprah is upsetting.
And later, the era of the Zen master begins.
Did you have them play in the dark at one point?
Super Soul Sunday will be right back. Raised in a strict Pentecostal home, Phil Jackson had been groomed to become a minister, just like his parents. But he found his true calling in sports. A gifted athlete, he was recruited to play basketball at the University of North Dakota. And it was there he became exposed to new ways of thinking and received, as he calls it, a rude spiritual awakening.
Wasn't it about 17 that you first heard about Darwinism?
Yes, going to college, being a biology student, having to study evolution and getting those concepts that were opposed to my biblical fundamental beliefs.
And what did you think at first? This is blasphemous?
Oprah is upsetting.
It was upsetting, yeah.
Yeah, deeply upsetting because, what you've believed is, in your heart of hearts. I was a good student of the Bible. I memorized 175 scriptures going through a catechism. My mother was a teacher of
What's your favorite scripture?
End times. Yea, though I speak with tongues, but do not have the spirit of love. That's really what I think Paul was talking about. Mm-hmm. That's a great scripture. But yeah, the advent of the earth only being 8,000 years old and all that kind of 6,000 years old, and it was really something that I had to deal with, and then it opened the door of education for me. Mm-hmm. And so I changed my majors when I was my first semester of my sophomore year of college and began philosophy, psychology, and religion. I had a composite major, and that put me in really great classes.
But I'm wondering, you as a young student of religion, as you are opening the door to seeing a broader way of how the world looks at these things, and not just your family and not just your community, did you feel you're going to be struck down every time you introduced a new idea to yourself? I mean, I've heard people talk about the idea of, oh, wow, when I was trying to leave the religion of my tradition, there's this feeling of, wow, I'm going to get struck by lightning, yes, or God is displeased, or
I'm going to lose my family.
I'm going to lose your family.
That's a big part. My brother, who is 4 years older, is instrumental in my life. He was at college, and he had run into some Buddhist teachings. I was, taking a variety of religious thought at the same time, and Buddhism was introduced to me, where there's no specific God, and the fact that there was a religion that was deeply spiritual, that didn't have, say, a deity at the center of it. My family, they were very opposed to Buddhism because they felt it was idolatry, that they worshipped a statue,
yes,
of Buddha. So I had that impression in my
yes,
head of Buddhism, yeah, when I first understood or heard about it. So all those things I had to deal with as to what is really this all about.
Yeah.
And come to terms with the fact that this is about an enlightenment that we're seeking. And here's a person that showed the doors to enlightenment, was a man who they called Buddha. And this statue is a symbol of, yes, what, yeah, we're trying to attain.
As Phil's perspective on spirituality evolved, he started to discover the sacred in unexpected places. In 11 Rings, he writes, "What fascinates most people about sports is not the endless chatter about strategy that fills the airwaves. It's what I like to call the spiritual nature of the game."
I think that there is spirituality in all things. I can see the sacred in the ordinary things, but I don't think most people, and a lot of them probably who are talking to you about this book, never thought of the spiritual nature of the game of basketball. What is that spiritual nature?
Wow, it's such a great community that you have when you play the sport, especially if you get to play it at a high level.
Yeah.
That there's this, this is what esprit de corps, the word exactly comes from, that there's a spirit among this connected group, a connected, yes, group of people.
Yeah.
And this spirituality is not about religion, of course. It's about the ability to incorporate other beings in your plans, in your system. Uh-huh. And my best nature also elevates their nature. And basketball or sports does this. It does this for us as watchers too, as spectators. We see something that, is a remarkable play, and we want to see it over and over again because it brings an elevated spirit to us, that this was not just an individual action.
You say some coaches are obsessed with winning trophies. Others like to see their faces on TV. What moves me is watching young men bond together and tap into the magic that arises when they focus with their whole heart and soul on something greater than themselves. Once you've experienced that, it's something you never forget. That is the spirituality you're talking about.
Yes, it is.
That is the spirit, that is the soul of the game that you're talking about.
It really is.
Coming up, Phil tries to convince his players to bench their egos.
Michael Jordan was as close to being a god,
Yes, right.
little g.
I didn't buy into that part of his being. I stayed away from it.
Super Solars, I cannot wait to hear your thoughts about this conversation. Facebook or tweet me using the hashtag SuperSoulSunday. We'll be back in a moment. Phil Jackson's latest book is called 11 Rings for the 11 championship titles he earned coaching in the NBA. But Phil actually has 13, having earned 2 additional rings as a player for the New York Knicks. That was in the early 70s.
Phil Jackson makes it.
And it was those years in New York that inspired the mindful Zen philosophy he brought to the Chicago Bulls. And his first NBA head coaching job, Phil inherited a team struggling to win, despite having one of the best players in the league, Michael Jordan.
What did you see, and I mean see, on a deeper level when you first were able to come into contact with the Bulls that first year? What did you see when you had them standing there on the baseline? And
When I first came to Chicago, Oprah, I was assistant coach, and I was just moved into this assistant coaching level as per chance, by luck, by good fortune. And I saw, a team that was searching for an identity. Their identity at the time was the magic of Michael Jordan, who was astounding not only the Chicagoans here, but the rest of the basketball world with his prowess on the court. Everybody clamoring, not just wanting, but clamoring to be part of this superb athlete's life. And I saw this intense drive to be a part of what everybody expected was going to be very exciting.
yeah,
And it was a lot of fun. And the fun generated a lot of energy. We had a lot of very young players that all of a sudden started maturing, and Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant. And then suddenly I was given the head coaching job. And my job was to organize this group of players so that they were not just Michael and the Jordanaires, his associating cast. So it was convincing him that these were really good players that you're with. You could make them better, because that's part of what stardom's all about, is making everybody else a little bit better.
yeah.
And he could do it.
Okay, so you say that it takes a number of critical factors to win an NBA championship, including the right mix of talent, creativity, intelligence, toughness, and of course, luck. But if a team doesn't have the most essential ingredient, love, none of those other factors matter. And you call it the circle of love. And that literally, when you first started coaching, that you were asked to wear your championship rings from your days with the Knicks.
Right.
Why?
Well, the general manager at the time, Jerry Krause, said these guys are going after something they don't really know what it is. No one around here has one. Chicago has never won one. He wanted them to have a symbol of what the ultimate goal is. The goal isn't about being the best scorer, being in the all-star team or anything else. The goal is about winning a championship. And to do that, everybody's got to sacrifice, give a little bit more of themselves in the process of bonding together and making this unit a cohesive group.
You talk about Penna Chodron's book, Start Where You Are, where one of the things that she states is that what you do for yourself, any gesture of kindness, gentleness, honesty, and clear seeing towards yourself will affect how you experience the world. That's what she writes. What you do for yourself, you're doing for others. What you do for others, you're doing for yourself. And you say this idea would later become a key building block in your work as a coach. How so?
We had a statement that we must have repeated so many times to the players. No man is an island. No man goes his way alone. What I put into the lives of others will come back into its own. And those words sometimes are difficult for the boys to hear. So then I would say, do you understand what I'm saying? No man goes his way alone. We're in this together.
How were you able to do that in the I don't even know what to describe because I was in Chicago during all of those years where Michael Jordan was a god. I mean, it was as close to being a god,
Yes, right.
little g, as anyone has ever experienced, I'm sure.
Yes.
And how do you have a sense of cohesiveness and build a team when the whole world, I'm sure that there were, you talk about it, Horace Grant and other players who just couldn't understand that you weren't a part of the media manufacturing machine for all things Michael?
Well, I had a fortunate relationship with Michael. I didn't buy into that part of his being. I stayed away from it. Never asked Michael for autographs, never had a relationship that had to deal with that, and actually had to ask him to cut back from what he was doing. I don't want you to be the scoring leader. The scoring leaders have not won championships, Michael, but I want to be the scoring leader, and I think I can still do it. I'll cut back on my scoring average. He volunteered to do that. So that was a relationship that we started out with that built.
You want him to cut back on his scoring average because what? You want to give other people on the team?
Everybody else had to be part of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And, that point, teams...
Did that feel to him, though, like you're asking me to be less than I can be?
I know.
Yes.
I know he accepted the role, which is wonderful.
Because a leader has to create the space for other people to step forward
in and be bigger.
And be bigger than.
Right.
Yeah.
Coming up, Phil's unorthodox coaching style raises some eyebrows.
So you would literally have the guys sit in stillness.
That's right.
Meditating.
That's right.
Super Soul Sunday. We'll be right back.
One of the things that you knew you had to do with the Bulls in the beginning here in Chicago, and then moving on to the Lakers, especially with Kobe Bryant, and you knew you had to create a team. You had to build a team. And one of the ways you did that was the one breath, one mind. Can you explain how, and what did the guys think of you coming in with your Zen stuff? Here you are.
I never couched it in Zen stuff. I approached it with mindfulness.
Mindfulness, yes.
A lot of our players in the NBA are from deeply religious families, very much like my background.
Yes, yeah.
And, anything that would be a conflict of their religious beliefs, I didn't want to touch or get them upset about it. And
Isn't it interesting how you knew that because you'd come from that?
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
So we talked about mindfulness as being, as much as we pump iron and we run to build our strength up, we need to build our mental strength up. We need to build our mental strength so we can focus, get one-pointed attention, and so that we can be in concert with one another in times of need. Mm-hmm. When you come off the court, you've had a bad call, things going wrong for you, you sit on the bench, you take a breath, and you reset yourself. You reset yourself. And you do that through this mindfulness. You just come right back in and collect yourself. So we practiced mindfulness, is what you have to do.
So you would literally have the guys sit in stillness.
That's right.
Meditating.
That's right. Taught them how to hold their hands, where their shoulders had to be, the whole process of being in upright situations so that you're not slouched and you're not going to fall asleep. And they bought into it.
Would you do this before every game? You would do this regularly? You would do this?
We introduced it, and we introduced it in training camp. And then day of games, we started using it. And it ultimately became a process where...
It's like centering yourself.
That's
centering,
right, just getting back and being centered. Mm-hmm.
Did you not also have them play in the dark at one point?
It wasn't totally dark, but I wanted them to get the idea of being able to do things that are just out of the ordinary, like silence day. You have a day of just silence. There's a lot of chatter in basketball, and rightfully you want players to be talking to each other and communicating with each other. But sometimes in practice it gets too verbose and guys are yelling and having fun with each other and teasing each other. So I tried to take things out of the ordinary and make them something special so they'd understand the difference.
And so were the guys receptive in the beginning to these new ideas about mindfulness and being able to master the game from the inner?
I think they tolerated it, and I think the reason why they tolerated it, this is one of the things I talk about in the book, is about being authentic and coming from who you are and what you think is important. I mean, you know, Oprah, I tried Tai Chi with the players. They were doing Tai Chi, and we tried yoga. We tried a bunch of things that didn't stick. The players were like, you know, I'm too tired after practice to do yoga. You know, I've got tendonitis of the knee. I can't get in a position that's right for Tai Chi. But I wanted to give them opportunities to explore some of those things. But what did stick was meditation. That was always something that was able to stick with these guys.
So powerful.
Yeah.
And then you move on to the Lakers. Were your mindfulness practices as embraced as they had been in Chicago?
You know, I think those guys would have laid down and let me run on top of them or something when I first got. They were very, very receptive. There was hiccups along the way, without a doubt. But as far as being willing learners with an open mind, they're very accommodating for me, and I'm very gracious and glad about that.
You actually say in the book that, you know, driving a basketball down the court could be one of the most mundane, you know, day-to-day, boring, as you describe it, activities, but being able to find the sacred in that.
Yes.
Yeah.
To put spirit into it. You have to get spirit back into things.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think that you were able to impart that to your players in a way that manifested not just on the court?
I think there are numbers of players that grasp the idea. Whether they could continue it in their personal lives or not, I don't know.
Yeah.
But they got it. Mm-hmm. And such a way that I was moved at times.
Yes.
At one time, maybe one of the most tense times, we're in the 7th game of a playoff against a great opponent, the Sacramento Kings, and we have to play the game on the road under duress. So we have a morning breakfast, we have a morning video session, and then we're going into an afternoon game. When I walk in at 10 o'clock, they're all there. They're all sitting. They're all ready to be practicing this mindfulness. I couldn't believe their attitude and their mindfulness won that game. They were able to be the steady hand at a time when you need it. And that ultimately turned out to be able to simply make free throws. Simply be steady enough in this pressure situation to put the ball in the hoop from the easiest point, the free throw line.
How, you know, you talk about this idea of mindfulness and being centered and coming back to self in a field where the very nature of the game fosters the ego. I mean, you talk about benching the ego in 11 Rings and how important that is as a step to bench that ego. But in a world where, and particularly for those of us on the outside world, it just looks like, I mean, that's a world filled with a lot of not just big, but tall egos. Yeah.
For sure. And money. And the money is there. And, you know, we have a, you know, salary cap, and everybody's trying to reach the maximum salary cap. And there's all these very many great pressures on these young men to really serve themselves, because they're thinking, it's my family, I'm looking after my group, my family, my mom, my dad, and, you know, they want to provide. And you have to forget about the family, your contract, where you're going to be next year, the fact that you're not guaranteed. All these things have to be set aside, and we have to be in the moment. You have to be now.
You know, when you address this, I never thought of it this way before for a player. You said, because I started as a player, I've always been able to empathize with young men facing the harsh realities of life in the NBA. Now, I thought, harsh realities in the NBA? Most players, you say, live in a constant state of anxiety, worrying about whether they're going to be hurt or humiliated, cut or traded, or worst of all, make a foolish mistake that will haunt them for the rest of their lives. When I was with the Knicks, I was sidelined for more than a year with a debilitating back injury, and that experience allowed me to talk with players I've coached from personal experience about how it feels when your body gives out and you have to ice every joint after a game, or even sit on the bench for an entire season. You know what I thought when I read that? No experience ever goes wasted. But because that had happened to you, you were able to relate to somebody else in your coaching field who had to go through it.
I was once invited to a little conclave. Bill Bradley put it together, and he opened it, and there were 7 couples there that were sharing ideas. He opened that by saying, I want you each to tell a story of your biggest failure that turned into your greatest asset. And it was amazing to listen to all the stories. My story was that story, obviously. Sidelined, team playing well in New York, and having to sit out, and the consequence of that led me into greater understanding of being a player. Not only that, but a relationship with a coach that probably spawned where I'm at today, or my career.
Coming up,
It feels like compassion and competition are in conflict with one another. It's hard to be compassionate about your competitor.
Super Soul Sunday. We'll be right back. Phil Jackson says he's long sought spiritual practices to help quiet his own restless mind. For him, Zen Buddhism held the key. Zen is a school of Buddhism that emerged in China during the 6th century. It teaches through mindful awareness and selflessness. One can approach every moment with clarity, focus, and calm. In his new book, 11 Rings, Phil says 3 Zen principles have been critical to him as a leader: giving up control, trusting in the moment, and living with compassion.
So we talked earlier about you studying different Eastern traditions, various religions, but you were drawn specifically to Zen Buddhism. Why?
Well, I think it's the daily practice of meditation. I think the form of meditation fits my style really well. You're beginning your day with a quiet mind and starting your day in peace. It's kind of getting into a peaceful atmosphere.
It's doing that thing you talk with the players, coming back to center.
Yeah, then you're always capable of bringing yourself back during the day.
Yeah. You share 3 aspects of it in the book that you like. It's giving up control, which is so interesting because the world I did until reading this, you think of a coach as being in control of his team, but you maintain control by giving up control. And particularly, you talk about the years with Dennis Rodman that you knew that the way to control is just to sit back and observe.
Dennis Rodman was a sight to behold, known as much for his antics off the court as for his aggressive play on it. Dennis was a rule breaker and a rebel, so Phil knew he had to connect with him on a different level.
One of the manifestos that I have, one of the books that means a lot to me is Zen Mind, Beginner Mind by Shunryu Suzuki, who founded the San Francisco Buddhist Center. And he talks about, when we try to control our mind, when we try to control our personalities that we're with, it's like trying to control a farm animal, a sheep, a cow, in a pasture that's too small for it. And it'll break through the fences. And the same thing will happen in the other situations. You need to have a lot of space to move. When you meditate, if you get obsessed with something, you'll break through your meditative state or your meditative practice and become focused on this unless you just let it go.
Yeah.
And you understand that in letting it go, you let it go through. It's like a cloud passing through the sky. It's like a log floating down the river. It's there in your sight, it comes in your mind, and then it passes right through. And it's the same way with a player. He has some aberrant behavior that's going on, and if you sit back and you just allow, it's happening. Okay, now he's through, now he's centered again, now we're okay. Now we're back on beam.
Yeah.
And it was
That's
kind of
a
like
player
that.
or your kid, whether it's your child or your player. Yes.
Your kid too.
Yes.
So it was like that with Dennis, and I had watched him before. He's with the Detroit Pistons, and Chuck Daly, who I admired as a coach, was an animated coach. And as he got animated, Dennis would become more animated on the floor. It's like his energy source was right there, feeding into Dennis's energy source. So I thought, this guy he sometimes can go over the edge. I better just sit back and become a quiet, and use that meditation practice while I'm sitting on the bench.
Trusting the moment. Explain that.
Well, this is something that, you know, we all get, find a point of tension that we go into. And it could be, you know, we get it all the time sitting in traffic, you
Yeah.
know. Why? Is this guy in my way? Or I'm in a hurry and, you know, whatever. There's no need to feel like your life's going to be destroyed by this single event that's happening right now. Just relax and breathe through it. And that's trusting in that moment. Yeah.
I think that's why you describe in the book why Michael Jordan particularly liked your coaching style so much, is because even in the most tense of moments and there are seconds remaining in the game, you could go into that centered space for yourself. That is amazing.
Yeah, well, it's
yeah.
practice.
And also living with compassion. How, you know, it feels like compassion and competition are in conflict with one another. It's hard to be compassionate about your competitor.
I think the compassionate part of it, you know, I always think that, you know, Christianity is centered on love. Buddhism centered on compassion. Compassion and love have a very common denominator with each other. They're very common, and so it bridges that gap. And compassion is that deep inner feeling of empathy, sympathy that goes along with seeing someone that, you know, yes, we're on this battlefield or basketball court or whatever it is together. We're trying to better each one or best each other. And I'm going to do my best, even though I really care about you and care about your well-being.
Yeah.
But I'm going to try and do that.
And if you're the best, if you're really good too, you're going to bring out the best in me.
And that way you can overcome them or win the day or whatever at that time and feel good about the fact that you did without having to get down to hate or, you know, I'm going to destroy this guy.
Yeah.
You know, that type of attitude.
Because that doesn't work.
It ultimately doesn't work.
Ultimately doesn't work.
Coming up, what's next for Coach Jackson?
I love that it's called 11 Rings. Is there a part of you that wants a 12th?
Maybe in another level. Is there another level to go to?
Plus, we're tackling life's big questions.
What's your definition of God?
And Phil calls this place his true refuge. We're off to Montana for a little breathing space. Super Soul Sunday will be right back.
What's your definition of God?
The unseen. I don't know. I think the I am that I am is the biggest definition that I have.
Mm-hmm.
It's simple, you know, knowing I am that I am.
When did you recognize that there was a connection to something bigger than yourself?
I think I had that feeling as a child, watching the spirit move through a group of worshipers.
Mm-hmm.
There was something moving in this audience that was...
you could tell.
Yeah. You
that it was real.
Feel it.
It was
right.
real.
Yeah.
What's the difference between spirituality and religion?
Doctrine.
Doctrine.
Yeah, you get tied up in doctrine and trying to define it and how to get to it. And spirituality's living in it.
Do you pray?
Yeah, I do.
Mm-hmm. Is your meditation your prayer?
It is. It is. But I have affirmations that I believe in.
I was just going to ask you, do you have a favorite quote or affirmation?
Well, I have a simple prayer that I use. Oh, thou sustainer of our bodies, hearts, and souls, bless all that we thankfully receive. And it's a Sufi thing.
Where do you feel most at home or at peace?
I'm a Montana guy. I have a space in Montana that really tunes me in.
Is it a particular space, or is it all of Montana?
Well, no, it's Flathead Lake. There's a big lake up there. It's like Tahoe. It's a big lake, and it's serene. Mm-hmm. It's a summertime place. It's pretty nice.
What do you know for sure?
That I'm going to die. Death is waiting us all, and that the best thing to do is try and live this life the best we can, and that everybody's trying to do their best, and sometimes they don't even know it.
Wow. I love that it's called 11 Rings. Is there a part of you that wants a 12th?
Maybe in another level. Is there another level to go to? I mean, I have a couple playing, 11 from coaching. I have no intention of coaching again. physically it's too difficult for me right now. I do think that I'd like to help somebody else win that ring, another of my many guys that are coaching and like the sport.
You would like to coach the coaches?
Yeah, I think that'd be something I could do.
I'm so glad you wrote this book. I wish we had hours and hours to share it and talk about it. But I know, obviously, it's a bestseller and that many other people will be opened and enlightened in ways unexpected by reading 11 Rings, The Soul of Success.
Thank you, Oprah. You know, you've done so much for people who read and who are searchers and seekers. And I value this opportunity to explain this to people.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
In today's Breathing Space, we visit Flathead Lake in Phil Jackson's home state of Montana. It's long been a place of refuge for Phil. For nearly 40 years, he spent every summer here. And we can see why. We'll see you next Sunday.